Well, hello there. It's been a while. I've been gone for about 2 weeks, which probably isn't the best upload schedule if you actually want to grow your YouTube channel. But I'm back now, and apparently, while I was gone, you guys somehow managed to get me to 100 subscribers. And honestly, I really want to take a moment to say thank you, because I genuinely didn't expect that to happen so quickly. When I started making these videos a little over a month ago, I obviously hoped that people would watch them, but I never expected so many people to actually engage with them, leave a comment or share their opinion, and especially come back for other videos that are already published. I had so much fun reading through the comments and just talking about Space Marine 2 with people who are clearly just as interested in the game as I am. So, seriously guys, thank you. I also made a community post to celebrate reaching 100 subscribers, and I asked you guys to leave your questions and opinions there because I want to make some kind of Q&A community discussion video. So if you want to be a part of that, make sure to check out the post and leave a comment. I'm going to pick out quite a few of your questions and opinions for that video, but with that out of the way and me finally being back, let's get back to the video. Before my hiatus, I recently finished my sniper challenges, which meant completing 50 missions on absolute difficulty. During those missions, I really wasn't trying to create some perfect optimized build. I mostly just played the game the way I normally would, swapping between different weapons and perk loadouts, depending on what I felt like playing. I think my most common used weapon were probably bolt carbine, the stalker bolt rifle, and of course the last user, because let's be honest, the last user has a special place in my heart. But after finishing a few more missions, I remembered something. The heroic bolt sniper still exists. So I decided to pick it back up. And almost immediately I realized something. Whether I was playing absolute difficulty solo or playing in a group, the weapon felt completely different from everything else I had been using. Obviously the weapon is powerful, that's kind of the point of the heroic weapon. They're supposed to feel special and offer something that normal weapons don't. But I don't think the problem is simply that the heroic bolt sniper is strong. The problem is that it started to feel like the weapon was removing content from the game. In solo play, I think it's great. You're responsible for everything on the mission during the mission anyway. So having a weapon that allows you to instantly eliminate certain priority targets can feel incredibly rewarding. And in the end, you're the sniper class. It's kind of your role. You're designed that way. But when you bring the weapon to a group play, that's where I started asking myself a different question. When one player can instantly delete most of the important Majora's enemies on the map, what exactly is left for the other two players to do? And I want to make something very clear here. This video is not about how the heroic bolt sniper needs to be nerfed. I'm not saying that the weapon should be destroyed or made useless, and I'm certainly not saying that anyone who's using it is doing something wrong. If you have a weapon that can one-shot Majora's enemies and you have the opportunity to do so, why wouldn't you? The problem isn't necessarily the player, the problem is the interaction between the weapon and the rest of the team. Space Marine 2 is at its best when everyone is actively engaging with the mission. Different players have different strengths and different tools that are designed to deal with different situations. A player might be looking forward to fighting a Majora's enemy in melee. Another player might want to use their weapons or abilities against priority targets. But when the sniper class can simply delete the most important enemy on the mission before anyone else gets the opportunity to interact with it, that interaction never happens. The tactical doesn't get to fight the Majoras, the assault doesn't get to ground pound melee enemies, the Vanguard doesn't get to use his ability cycle. The enemy is simply gone. If this happens once, it obviously doesn't really matter, but when it happens repeatedly throughout an entire mission, it starts to change the way the game is played. And that is where I think the conversation becomes interesting. The reason I think this is worth talking about right now is because it's not about one weapon. Within the next few weeks, patch 14 is gonna launch, and with it, we're getting 6 brand new hero weapons. I actually had the opportunity to play around with some of the weapons when the PTS was available about 2 weeks ago, but I want to be completely honest here, I don't think the PTS was in a state where I could confidently judge every single one of them. Some of the perk effects weren't working correctly, and some of the weapon stats were just misleading and simply incorrect. Because of that, it was difficult to understand exactly how some of the weapons were supposed to perform. So I don't want to pretend that the PTS was a perfect representation of the final version. However, despite these issues, a large part of the community still reacted negatively to the new weapons. And I think that's interesting, because on paper, adding 6 new heroic weapons sounds fantastic. More weapons, more unique perks, more build diversity, and more reasons to experiment. that's exactly what heroic weapons should be doing. They should give the developers the opportunity to create weapons that feel different from the normal weapons we already had and encourage different playstyles. I don't want 6 more weapons that are just slightly different versions of weapons we already had. I want they to feel unique. I want to use one and think, okay, this completely changes how I play this class. But the more unique these weapons become, the more difficult they are to balance. And I think that's where the heroic bolt sniper becomes relevant again, because it's a perfect example of a heroic weapon that can completely change the way you interact with the game. It isn't simply a stronger version of a normal bolt sniper. It can reach breakpoints that fundamentally change how you approach Majora's enemies. And that's exciting. But it also raises a very important question. How far can heroic weapons go before they start interfering with the balance of the game? Because as Space Marine 2 continues to receive support, we're going to see more and more heroics. Every new weapon needs to feel unique. It needs its own identity, its own perks, and its own reason to exist. But at the same time, it still needs to fit inside the existing balance of the game. And that becomes increasingly difficult. The most interesting heroic weapons are probably the ones that do something completely different from the normal version. But those are also the weapons with the highest potential to become problematic, because the more unique a perk is, the more difficult it becomes to predict how players are going to use it. A perk might seem completely reasonable when it's designed, but when players discover a specific weapon combination, a specific class, or a specific interaction between different perks, and suddenly the weapon is doing something nobody expected. At that point, you're no longer having a weapon that is simply powerful, you have a weapon that is changing the fundamental balance of the game. And that is the line I think we need to start talking about. Because there's a difference between a weapon making you stronger and a weapon making the rest of the team irrelevant. So, when we talk about heroic weapons, I don't think the question should be simply, is this weapon strong? They are supposed to be strong. I think the better question is, what does this weapon remove from the game? Does it simply give you a powerful advantage, or does it simply remove the need for other players to participate? Does it give you more options, or does it make the other weapons irrelevant? Does it create a new playstyle, or does it simply make the existing game easier? Because that's the difference between a powerful weapon and a weapon that starts interfering with the game balance. And with the heroic version of the Bolt Sniper, I think we're getting closer to that line. Not necessarily because the weapon is badly designed, and not necessarily because it needs to be nerfed, but because at some point creativity can start to create problems. Because the longer Space Marine 2 is supported, the more heroic weapons we're going to get, and the more creative these weapons become, the more important balance is going to be. Eventually, there is a point where a weapon stops adding something new to the game and starts removing the things that made the game fun in the first place. And I think the heroic plasma pistol is another good example of that. Majora's enemies are usually a pretty important part of a mission. They are the enemies that interrupt the normal flow of combat and force you to react. You have to decide on how you're going to deal with them, which player is going to focus what, and how you're going to manage the situation around them. But with the heroic plasma pistol, you can just basically pull it out and delete an entire group of 4 Majoras in an instant. And again, I don't think necessarily that it makes the weapon bad. It feels incredibly powerful, and that's probably exactly what makes it fun to use. But when you can remove an entire group of Majora's enemies in an instant, you can also remove the encounter itself. There is no real decision making anymore, there is no opportunity for other players to engage with those enemies, and the entire situation that the game created for you is just gone. And that's really what I'm getting at with all these heroic weapons. I don't think the problem is simply that they are powerful. The problem is that some of them can potentially remove the things that make the game interesting in the first place. And with 6 new heroic weapons coming in patch 14, I think the conversation we're probably going to keep having. Because personally, I really like the idea of heroic weapons. I want them to be unique. I want them to have interesting perks, and I want them to give us a way to play a class a different way. But I also think there needs to be a point where we stop and ask ourselves whether a weapon is actually adding something to the game, or whether it's simply allowing us to skip parts of it. But that's just my opinion. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about heroic weapons. But do you think weapons like the bolt sniper and plasma pistol are too strong? Or do you think this is exactly how heroic weapons should feel? Did you play the new weapons on the PTS? And if you did, what do you think about them? I know the PTS had its problems, especially with some perks not working properly, and some of the weapon stats just being misleading, so I'm really interested in hearing what you guys actually thought about the new weapons. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and once again, I generally appreciate everyone who has watched one of the videos, left a comment, or decided to stick around. And don't forget to check out the community post if you want to be a part of the Q&A and community discussion video I'm planning. Leave your questions and opinions there, and I will be using a lot of your comments for that video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.